Bill 60 threatens tenants. NDP calls for real rent control. Welcome to Regent Park TV. I'm Isaiah. Today, Regent Park TV brings you coverage of a Queen's Park media conference where Ontario's NDP raised alarms over Bill 60, legislation that could make it easier for landlords to raise rents and evict tenants, an issue hitting hard in Toronto Centre and downtown East communities. The Ontario NDP, including local MPP Kristen Wong-Tam, spoke out against Bill 60, warning that the proposed changes would put tenants at risk of unaffordable rent increases and faster evictions. Advocates highlighted the struggles faced by renters navigating a backlogged Landlord and Tenant Board, while calling for real rent control and stronger protections for families and individuals in urban communities like Regent Park and the surrounding downtown East neighborhoods. The full session, courtesy of the Legislative Assembly of Ontario, documents the urgent concerns and proposed solutions raised by advocates and elected officials.
Doug Ford wants to raise rents for tenants across the province. Today, Ontario is in the middle of a jobs disaster, and now this government wants to make it easier for people to lose their homes. Bill 60 reduces protections for tenants by allowing fast-tracked evictions and unaffordable rent increases. And while Doug Ford has retreated from his all-out attack on renters, on ending long-term leases and making housing even more precarious to tenants, we know that we cannot trust this government to keep their word. Tenants in Ontario are not to blame for this government's failure to build housing. They are not to blame for this government's failure to create good jobs and to make life more affordable. With over 80,000 people without housing and 800,000 workers without jobs, what we need today are strong protections for renters, good affordable housing, and a government that fights to protect workers, not one that attacks them. And now we will hear from people with first-hand experience, beginning with Charlene Henry from the York South-Weston Tenants Union. Thank you.
Thank you, Kat. Good morning. My name is Charlene Henry, and I'm the co-chair of the York South-Weston Tenant Union. The York South-Weston Tenant Union is a grassroots organization that advocates for tenants and educates tenants on their rights. This advocacy work is much needed and empowers tenants to stand up for their rights and to help other tenants do the same. Over the past few days, I have had many conversations with my neighbors and fellow tenants about Bill 60. Let me be frank. People are very scared of what the proposed changes will mean to them and their lives. Tenants are already feeling the pressure from the cost of living crisis that's happening right here in Ontario. And tenants are already feeling the pressure and tenants feel like they have no rights, and that without proper education, their rights and no rights, they feel helpless. Pushing forward with Bill 60 will displace tenants faster than ever before. What more do tenants have to do to be able to feel secure in their homes? Since the announcement last week, my neighbors have felt violated. Imagine working so hard and not feeling like you have a home that's secure. Tenants feel many harsh realities, and the Bill 60 announcement was a slap in the face. Many tenants around this province face the harsh reality daily that most of their paycheck goes to rent. I was at a community event on the weekend for tenants and was talking with residents, and one man told me that he pays 90% of his take-home pay in rent. When I asked him how they survive, I was told the food bank is a big help. This is a reality for thousands of tenants in Ontario. The narrative that we are being sold is that these changes will make more units available. We all know that this is false. Let me be clear. Bill 60 will displace tenants from their homes and add to the housing crisis in Ontario. We must ask ourselves, how many more people must be displaced in Ontario? Ontario needs real rent control, vacancy control, and a ban on above guideline increases, and quite frankly, a rent freeze. We are navigating complicated times, and the residents of Ontario deserve a government that is going to stand up for them. Remember, housing is a human right, and we all deserve to live in a home that suits the needs of our families. Many tenants, including my neighbors, face this harsh reality every day, every week, every month, and every year, as most of their paychecks go to rent. This is a reality for thousands of tenants in Ontario. This reality leaves families to figure out how they will eat and how they will pay their bills. This government has responsibility to the people of Ontario. Instead of making it harder for tenants, let's work together to make a better life for all of Ontario. Thank you.
Thanks.
Good morning.
My name is Chiara Padavani, and I am the co-chair of the York South-Weston Tenant Union with my colleague Charlene, who just spoke. I want to be clear. Bill 60 is Doug Ford's declaration of war on tenants. Instead of listening to the millions of Ontario renters struggling to keep a roof over their heads, Doug Ford is in the pockets of the landlord lobby, the biggest and most wealthy corporate landlords in this province, because they are the only ones who want the changes in this bill. How do I know? Because Doug Ford isn't even trying to hide it. When this PC government announced the changes to the Landlord and Tenant Board that Bill 60 will bring forward, he wasn't standing beside tenants, as the NDP here is today. He was standing beside the leader of the landlord lobby, whose job it is to lobby on behalf of Starlight, of Caprit, of the biggest landlords in this province. Everyone agrees that rent is out of control. But instead of controlling the rent, Doug Ford and this PC government with Bill 60 is just looking to make it easier and faster to evict tenants who have lived in their homes for years so that their big corporate landlords can skirt around rent control by jacking up the rents for the new tenant. That is what this bill is about. And now the PC government and Doug Ford want us to think this is about bringing balance to the Landlord and Tenant Board. Anyone who has spent 5 minutes at the Landlord and Tenant Board knows that there is no balance at the Landlord and Tenant Board, that tenants get eaten up for breakfast, lunch, and dinner at that place. And instead of bringing balance to the Landlord and Tenant Board, where tenant applications take 3 to 5 times longer to be heard at the Landlord and Tenant Board than landlord applications, because when a landlord wants to evict a tenant, their application gets heard in 3 months. When a tenant wants to have their grievance against their landlord, illegal rent charge, horrible mold, collapsing buildings and units, harassment, those applications take between 12 and 18 months to be heard at the Landlord and Tenant Board. So let me be very clear to the fellow millions of renters in this province. This bill is not about balance to the LTB. This bill is about making it easier for the landlord you already know wants to kick you out so that they can jack up the rent for the new tenant. It's making it easier for them to do that. And I want to be clear to Doug Ford. On behalf of the York South-Weston Tenant Union and renters all over this province, keep your hands off our rights, keep your hands off our leases, and keep your hands off the Residential Tenancies Act.
Hello. My name is Veronica Sinclair, and I live in a rental building owned by a very large corporation. In the last 8 years, I have experienced threats of eviction for the most ridiculous reasons. For example, parking my 90-year-old mother's car in my parking spot because it's not registered. I got a letter for that. For keeping my doors open about 5 inches on a couple of occasions. I don't know how they check it. I got a letter threatening me with eviction because it's the fire code. Most recent eviction notice N5 was served on me in July, and this is for allegedly harassing a superintendent for the last 8 years about his 3 large dogs running off leash in the building, outside of the building, and all the parks around where I live. I've been harassing him because I've been calling 311 and sending emails to the landlord about his dogs being off leash. I have been diagnosed with ASD, that's acute stress disorder, sort of like civilian PTSD, because it's just been so frightening to have this huge corporation with lawyers against me and just me. That case is still before the Landlord and Tenant Board, and I just want to say, if this bill goes through, I don't know what's going to happen to people like me who have lived for decades in our homes, and all of a sudden we're not protected. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Cynthia Black, and I've been organizing with the Livermore High Park Tenants Association since it was founded in 2022. While I am happy to be standing here alongside the Ontario NDP in opposition to this terrible Bill 60, I also hate that I have to stand here once again today to point out yet again another piece of terrible changes that Doug Ford's government somehow thinks is going to help this housing crisis. It's not. Financialized landlords are experts at making profit off the backs of renters. From cutting corners on repairs to actively seeking loopholes in existing legislation to help pad their bottom line. If there's a way for these landlords to find a way to make an extra buck, they will already be able to find it. As if it weren't enough that landlords were gifted the 2018 rent control exemption loophole that led to crushing rent increases across the province and in my buildings. Look, when my neighbors in the Livermore High Park buildings began getting rent increases of up to 12% or more each year, we organized to fight back against our landlord, GWL Realty Advisors. While this did lead to a strong, organized, positive community, and we did have some wins along the way, I was unable to help friends and neighbors who continued to get priced out because of these rent increases. Landlords don't need changes to make it easier to evict people. People who are clinging to the dwindling stock of truly affordable and rent-controlled housing need greater protection from landlords who want to drive them out to replace those homes with new buildings free from rent control. People living in non-rent controlled buildings need protection from landlords who already have the ability to economically evict them to inflate prices. And people, for reasons related to disability, race, too many to mention, who need protection from their landlord for countless reasons. These are the people who need changes to legislation to help them, not the landlords. So people who rent, they already carry the massive burden of supplying profits to landlords through their rent payments. They frequently do this while struggling to get landlords to make basic repairs, trying to scrounge up enough money to prepare for the next rent increase. While the Ford government walked back on their consideration to consult about ending indefinite leases, the people who rent now carry the additional burden of knowing that their government even considered this. Thank you.
Thank you. And I am also sorry that you have to be back here fighting for your rights. And I thank my colleagues who are here with me today, our leader, Merritt Stiles, who has been fighting against this most egregious legislation that we see in front of us in the form of Bill 60. So we're open to questions.
Catherine, when Bill 60 came out, almost immediately, Mayor of Toronto, Olivia Chow, came out and was not very happy publicly about it. On the other side, in Ottawa, how do you feel about, Mayor Sutcliffe's reaction or non-reaction so far? I don't think I've heard that much from him about that for a city that has, I think, almost 40% rentals.
Yes, absolutely. It was disappointing not to see mayor of our second largest city come out and demand that this legislation be repealed. There are over 40% renters in the city of Ottawa. And our housing crisis is growing. As you know, we were the first city in the country to declare a housing and homelessness emergency. And to date, we have very strong organizations, Operation Come Home, doing all the work that they can to end youth homelessness, other organizations that are working on the ground. But we need our leaders. We need our leaders across this province to come out and to fight for the people that they represent.
Message for him? Do you plan to talk to him about this?
Well, I am leaving here later today. I'll be at the Ontario Nonprofit Housing Association conference. I'll be speaking with several leaders there about what a coordinated response, back into municipalities would look like. We know that AMO has come out strong. AMO is, at the very least, said that, we need to protect renters. This is happening on the ground. It's happening on the ground in municipalities, in small municipalities, medium, large municipalities, and we need people. We need all of our leaders to come out and take a stand against it.
I wonder what, in your view, a balancing of the scales would look like at the Landlord Tenant Tribunal. What reform would be needed to help tenants there?
Thank you for that question. I want to start by just giving a couple of examples of how this Landlord and Tenant Board is functioning right now. Within the last 6 months, our tenant union has had to protect our members, one of whom was served an eviction notice that said the sheriff is coming to change his locks, over 1 penny. Over 1 penny. That is the kind of Landlord and Tenant Board that is currently functioning. So as far as we're concerned, anything that makes it easier for those kinds of things to happen, and I want to be frank, those tenants who've lived in their homes for a long time would have been evicted, would have been put out on the streets had Bill 60 been in place then. Why? Because Bill 60 is limiting the opportunities for tenants just like that one to set aside an eviction order, limiting opportunities for tenants just like that one to appeal an eviction order. I'll give you another example. In 1440 and 1442 Lawrence Avenue West, the buildings were in such a state of disrepair that Canada Post stopped delivering mail. Dozens of tenants had eviction hearings at the LTB that they did not know about. And they did not know about them because their landlord let their building fall into a state of such disrepair that Canada Post would not enter it to deliver their mail. Those tenants had orders issued against them that they needed to leave their homes, and the only way they were able to keep them was because their tenant union banded together and demanded that their landlord reinstate those tenancies, and were able to actually file an appeal. This bill takes away those rights from tenants. There is no question that this will lead to many, many more people on the streets because it is taking away the safeguards that let those members stay. I also just want to say, last week I was at the LTB for another member whose landlord claimed that they were in $300 worth of arrears. This landlord had their parking garage collapse on top of their car. Okay? At that board, at that Landlord and Tenant Board, at her hearing where the landlord claimed she was behind rent $300, when in fact the landlord owed her $1,500, the LTB refused to listen to the fact that her car was impacted by the collapse of the car parking garage. This is the kind of things that will be cemented and made even more difficult for tenants at the Landlord and Tenant Board if this bill goes through, and it will lead to many, many more tenants getting kicked out onto the streets. To answer your question, now that I've been on my soapbox for a little couple of minutes, what we need at the Landlord and Tenant Board are every single one of the protections that exist for tenants to remain in place. First and foremost, don't touch the very few protections that tenants have at the LTB. And furthermore, if we want to speed up eviction applications at the LTB, then we sure as hell better be speeding up tenant applications at the LTB, because tenants have to wait a year and a half to have those grievances brought to the LTB. So it's crystal clear that this bill only focuses on speeding up evictions. There isn't a single change recommended in this bill that helps tenants get their grievances at the LTB faster. And so what do tenants do? It means they are forced to have to organize outside of the LTB because they cannot find justice at the Landlord and Tenant Board. And in fact, to my fellow tenants across this province, I would like to encourage you to do that, because the LTB is going to be further stacked against us with this bill. So you better join a tenant union, you better organize, and you better work with your neighbors to protect yourself, because Doug Ford isn't going to do it for you.
Maybe just a quick follow-up on just the piece on indefinite leases, and perhaps for any tenant advocates that want to comment on this as well. But why do you think the government appears to have kind of rolled back on that consultation? And I guess do you have confidence that it's kind of off the table now, or is this something you think the government will consider at a later date?
Thank you for the question. They rolled back because tenants organized, called, emailed. I was at a tenant meeting last night. 3,000 people emailed a Liberal MP. And people were bombarding. People called Doug Ford, said, hey, I'm a tenant, and this is not right. People organized. We had a call with 600 plus people on it from all over Ontario, demanding that, what can we do? What are we going to do to fight this bill? And that was just when the announcement came on Sunday night about the rollback. But the rollback doesn't mean that it's not going to happen, that they're not thinking about it, and that they're not going to undermine tenants. I'm on a long-term, month-to-month lease. I know what that will do for my family, but I also know what it will do for all of my neighbors in the York South-Weston Tenant Union. It will put them on the street. So we put pressure, and it was rolled back, but we want pressure for it to completely go away, for tenants to have the rights to have a month-to-month lease.
What do you make? I mean, at least when the government was proposing it, there was a sentiment that they thought that change that they were consulting on, amidst other changes, would potentially put new units on the marketplace for renters. And I suppose other folks, what do you make of that claim?
I laugh at it, because we know that folks that are in units for a long period of time may be in units that don't suit the needs of their family, but there's also families that are 5-6 people in a one-bedroom apartment all over Ontario. So the units are being used. It's just maybe not allocated the right way. So they need to do their research, because they can come and consult us at the York South-Weston Tenant Union. We know a lot about who's in units that don't suit their needs, because we're on the ground doing the work with people in their lived experience. But we laugh at that because we know that folks are in their units and they cannot afford to go out and rent a unit equivalent to what they have from 5, 10, 15 years ago for the price that it is in Ontario right now. And it's not just a Toronto thing, it's an all over Ontario thing. The prices in the GTA have affected everywhere, and it's expensive to rent units all over this province. We talk to people as far as Sudbury, so we know what's happening on the ground. Thank you.
So we'll wrap up. I do just want to make one point on the retreat, if you will, from Doug Ford. He has not committed to not bringing back those consultations. He's been asked several times, his minister has been asked, and they have not committed to that. So we have got to be vigilant. They have shown their vindictive hand against renters, and we will continue to work. So thank you, everyone. And yeah.
Are you guys putting pressure also on the Attorney General? Because he was, my understanding was that he was the one defending the measures related to the LTB when the bill was tabled and when he was questioned about it. So are you just putting pressure on Rob Flack or also Doug Downey?
On Doug Ford.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. I'm the shadow Attorney General. Pressure is being applied on Downey. Obviously, the Premier is the head of government, so there he gets a lot of those questions. But the reality is that the Landlord Tenant Board has been broken for a number of years. This government has had over 8 years to fix it. We saw backlogs really spike up during the COVID pandemic to 53,000, 56,000 cases. The Ombudsman landed a pretty stark report, as you all know, condemning the challenges that both landlords and tenants are seeing at the LTB, and the changes that are being proposed through Bill 60 that affect how quickly evictions will take place and how it will effectively silence tenants is still in place in that bill. So that's why there is going to be ramped up efforts to make sure that this government is held to account. Right now, the Landlord Tenant Board is so backed up, as we've heard from the speakers today, but Doug Downey and the Attorney General specifically, who's got the carriage of the 13 tribunals in Ontario, what we're seeing here is that he has underfunded, under-resourced, and mismanaged the LTB to the point that it is so broken, and now he's looking for a way to clear that backlog by speeding up the evictions. And so that's really the problem that we're seeing here. This web of this Bill 60 has a web of different schedules that affect many different things, but a big piece of it, underlining all of it, is the dysfunction and the broken administrative tribunal system that is chaired by Sean Weir. And he should also be held accountable as a political appointee and a failed PC candidate who was handed this plum appointment, because he has done nothing to improve the system, and we are still seeing a broken system that is still years in the making for us to see the backlog cleared. I want to add that Doug Downey, in a question during the question period, he had suggested that when he introduced the bill, I should say, he has suggested that a floating rate of 30,000 cases as a backlog is acceptable. I don't know what world he's operating in, that 30,000 case backlog is acceptable anywhere. So that's where this government is coming from as a baseline of success. What we see is nothing but failure.
Bill 60 would accelerate evictions and remove key safeguards for tenants, putting many at risk of losing their homes. Tenant organizing and advocacy remain essential to defending housing rights and ensuring the law protects residents fairly. For Regent Park TV, I'm Isaiah.
Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Also follow us on social media, and for more information, check out our website.